I appreciate that, Jeremy, for the intro. My title is Landscape Environmental Stewardship. And I've kind of started to develop the research program around doing more with less. And less being an acronym, Landscape Environmental Stewardship Strategies. What ways can we improve our landscape, improve the value that they provide economically, environmentally, sociologically, by reducing our maintenance and improving our management strategies of those environments. Because we don't want our maintenance of those environments to conflict with the value that they provide. And PGRs are an area that I've had a little bit of experience in, more so on the greenhouse and nursery application of them, and less so in the landscape, but it's an area of growing interest. And really my experience with PGRs, other than some of the anecdotal stuff that I'll show you, has been through researching and discussions with some of the chemical manufacturers, how these products worked and best applications, and interviews with landscapers. And those were all kind of brought together, distilled in a couple of magazine articles that were recently published. I was first asked to write one for Alabama Turf Times, and then Mississippi Turfgrass asked to reprint that article. I'm really appreciative of the opportunity to publish in these. I love trade articles. I need to read more of them, but the interactions you get from these are 10x what we get as researchers in scientific publications. And I know Jeremy agrees with that. So we love the back and forth. We love the investigatory work, but these are really fun. And so basically what I'm going to talk about today is primarily contained in these two articles, which you can pick up anytime. I'd like to first introduce, some of the statistics from the National Association of Landscape Professionals. It's a great institution. I encourage everybody to check it out. They come out with a state of the industry report every year, surveying people across North America within the green industry. And what I wanted to point out here was pruning. So 83% of their participants that conduct landscape maintenance, and this includes anything from hardscaping, construction, irrigation, tree care, even 83% provide landscape maintenance services. So that's the vast majority of our green industry is maintaining landscapes. And within that maintenance, 76% of them are performing pruning activities. So this is a really common practice. I also included here land care and chemical applications. I think this is a growing sector of our green industry. I'm seeing a lot of my friends and a lot of folks that I talk to, the entrepreneurship in this area is skyrocketing. And a lot of people think that there are higher margins in this area. So it's gaining a lot of traction. So I include this one in here because I think this discussion about PGRs could also be included in some of these lawn care and chemical applications as part of their annual services. Within that sector, some of the greatest concerns that our industry has is, at the time, high fuel prices. Now, we've seen those come down a little bit. We don't really control those. These are, macroeconomic issues. But number two, right here, and probably the most frequent that I hear when I talk to landscapers, are labor shortages. And so this is always generally in the top 5 quality labor shortages. They're also concerned with economic recessions and supply chain issues. These are things in the aftermath of the COVID era that we're still dealing with. But the top 2 are generally fuel prices and quality labor shortage. So what can we do about that? I think both of these have resulted in some of the changes in practice that we're seeing. Not that PGRs are anything new to horticulture, to landscape management in general. But if you talk to some of the PGR manufacturers, they're seeing 2x, 100% increase in interest on their PGR products. And I think the labor shortage is the main reason that's driving this discussion. Some of the products that are out there, I just want to go through kind of the three formulations that you can purchase for PGRs. There's a lot of different active ingredients, but you'll see a lot of these replicated, just different trade names. Some of these, like paclobutrazol, have been around a really long time. Timing is critical on granular products because they take time to translocate. So these are systemically active ingredients. We're going to apply them to the soil. Roots are going to uptake them in the typical processes of nutrient and water gathering. If they're going to travel up the stems, which is a relatively slow process, and towards the meristematic regions of the plant. So timing is really, really critical on these granular products. You're going to see, in general, what we see with a lot of herbicide and other pesticide granular products, a good bit of variability in the efficacy of these products in species, size, or environmental conditions. So every plant's going to respond a little bit differently. Every situation is going to be a little bit differently. It's going to be a little bit different. I think that's this point here really stresses or emphasizes the need for every landscaper that's interested in these products to kind of test them out and evaluate them on a small scale initially and see how it might best work for them. In general, though, these products are going to be best used immediately after pruning. So if you have an early summer, June pruning application, or a late summer, sometimes these get into August and September, you're going to want to apply these granular products right after that. The timing on when you might see some of these results, again, will vary by species, size, and environmental conditions. So a couple photos. This is a boxwood hedge taken 4 months after pruning, so left untreated, right treated. So great control on this edging planting of boxwoods. But two other species that give me nightmares when I was landscaping and pruning are lower petalum. I think everybody is frustrated pruning lower petalum, particularly some of the older cultivars that were out. I'm thinking about ruby. It's not so much a shrub as it is a tree. I've seen 30-foot specimens of ruby. But this is 4 months after application of Cutlass. So left untreated, right treated. And then let's go to another fan favorite. This is Iliagnus. So Iliagnus, this is 9 months after treatment on the left with Cutlass and on the right untreated. So we're seeing 6 to 9 months control, and this is very much anecdotal evidence. Like I said, you can see different results based on the species or the age or the location in particular, the timing of the application. But great efficacy between these two and a long duration on the products. That's really what the systemic or translocated products can provide you. Now, the foliar spray products are great. I think a lot of people shy away from foliar applications or from liquid applications of herbicides. Just thinking of my past experience working with nurserymen on pre-emergent applications. Tried and true, what's familiar is granular. And granular just seems to be easy. And so it's common that they fall into a pattern of applying pesticides that have the appearance of being easy to apply. Because calibration can scare some folks. I know they scare our students away in the horticulture department. No one likes calibrating, even though I think we've got some great educators. We teach it constantly in a variety of different classes. These foliar products are easier than most pesticides that you would have to calibrate. Why? Well, this is pretty much as simple as as mixing a 2% glyphosate, or I guess more accurately glufosinate, because this is a contact application rather than a systemic. But it's just a ratio. So we're mixing a concentration within our tanks, and we're making sure that we have good coverage with these applications. Okay, so there's really no calibration needed. You can't really over apply. You can under apply, and by under applying, we just don't get good contact with the plants. And so a general rule is we want to apply to drip, right? So we want an even distribution or coverage of the plant, and we want to apply it to the point where our product is dripping off the plant. And you don't want to overuse it because some of these products can be relatively expensive. So here I've got a dwarf Burford holly on the left. It was treated. The right was not. And you can see the difference in growth rate there. So rather than this being translocated through the plant, these foliar products only work where they are applied. Okay, so coverage then is critical with these products. Let's have another fan favorite that keeps me up. I get nightmares when I think about pruning these plants: Loropetalum, Iliagnus, and this will round out my top three, Cleara. So Cleara, an amazing landscape plant in its hardiness, but it grows so quickly. And we get a lot of new flushes throughout the year. I would prune these 3 times a year, typically, if I was shearing or hedging, but they don't really shear and hedge too well, as you get a lot of tattered leaves. And so the more you prune, the lower the aesthetic appearance of this plant in particular. So the left untreated and the right treated, we can get some great control with these. The timing is a little bit different on these products. And as you could see in the previous list that I showed, we have a lot of products available for turf, a lot. Why? The golf industry uses PGRs pretty often. So it's a large market. There's a lot of potential for these. There's incentives for these chemical manufacturers or product manufacturers to get into the golf market, because there's a greater market penetration and potential within turf. Landscape, not quite as much, but we could talk about those later. I love seeing this. The other thing I want to point out is maintenance hazards, and I think I'm going to touch on that a little bit later. The last one, and where I see a little bit greater acceptance rate, even though this is a smaller, more niche corner of our industry, is in soil injection products. And here I'm kind of specifically referring to trees. So more arboriculture techniques. We've got shortstop and Campustat. Those are 2 that we even use on campus at Auburn and that we're testing out right now. They're best applied when the plant is actively growing. So you want a lot of transpiration and water uptake. We're applying much larger volumes of product per tree, but those dose requirements do vary by tree species, sensitivity, and size. And you really need to read the label carefully on these. Not every plant is going to be found on that label. For example, we don't have overcup oak, which is our second most common oak on campus, on that label. And they told us to apply at the rate of bur oak. So if you want to kind of establish that communication with your reps and those chemical companies to make sure that you're applying dosages that they would recommend based on their experience and trialing these. Soil and mulch may affect efficacy here. And I think this is this is an ignored area of this. So I've heard of several people applying PGRs, and these are folks at Bartley, Davy Trees, and municipal arborists, that sometimes they get great control on growth and sometimes they don't. And since a lot of these products are also labeled for greenhouse and nursery use, and I've done some very small research on them, I know that pine bark in particular binds paclobutrazol. And that's the only active ingredient we see up here with these products. And it doesn't just bind paclobutrazol. You will need to get an equivalent rate of control. You'll need to 4, 5, 10x the application to get the same reduction in growth that you would in a sandy soil, when we're growing crops in peat or any kind of wood fiber. And so I think a lot of these, through years of pine bark mulching, or maybe just some of the epidermis layers of the roots, they may inhibit the absorption of these products into the tree. And so I think there needs to be a good bit of research. If there was a big gap in our knowledge or understanding of these products, I think it's probably here, and how these different mulch types or soil types affect plant uptake or binding of these active ingredients. And this is generally how they're applied. So you have two mechanisms. You can get a pump, and those can be battery powered or gas powered, and it can be real quick. Injecting around the basal flare of the tree is a general application suggestion. Here we're using kind of a pneumatic hand-driven pump with our campus arborist Alex. We prefer this method because it's quiet. It doesn't bring attention to all the students if we're making applications during a normal class day. And so it works really well. Of course, you need to calibrate that based on the dosage and recommendation of the labels. As always, read the labels. But this is great. Why is this great? Urban landscapes are awful on trees. And we do have fascinations with large, big, beautiful trees, but I would say I don't think landscapes need an 80, 100-foot oak. At times those can become more of a liability than an asset. And 40, 50-foot size trees can be phenomenal and perfect and not outgrow the space that we give them in the landscape. So on campus, we're using these a lot. A lot of our arborists are using these, but it's mostly for plant health. That is the driving force in the utilization in the arboriculture industry. So why integrate PGRs? Well, pruning is a task that most crew members would rather avoid. One of the first few days landscaping for a company, I got thrown the head shears because the previous guy had an accident, nicked an artery in his knee, and everyone else was scared of pruning. But I was the new guy. I didn't see the blood. And so I said, sure, I'll take it. And that was my task from that time on. So there's a liability. There's a liability in using head shears. It's a dangerous piece of equipment. I've had a couple accidents myself. It's tough when you have those open reciprocating blades without any kind of shielding or protection on them. A lot of landscapers I talk to say the primary reason that they are adopting PGRs or integrating PGRs is a reallocation of labor. They can use good guys in other areas and other aspects of their operations rather than pruning. No cleanup. And I know it's a common practice to prune, maybe sweep up some of the bigger clippings and then apply some mulch and kind of cover it up. We have some elderly folks in our HOA that love to pick up that mulch and go, ha, I saw that those clippings, they didn't pick them up, and they'll gripe and complain. Customer satisfaction is difficult. Well, we can avoid that altogether, the whole cleanup process, or even trying to hide some of the clippings with applications of PGRs. So we do have a double whammy here. We can reduce the amount of pruning. We can reduce the cleanup and time it takes to remove that debris, and reducing liability. And I'm not just talking about liability with the equipment, the pruning equipment in particular. These are pictured on the right, what I consider maintenance hazards in the landscape. And we have to put these up on campus every fall so that folks don't drive on the president's estate to park for these football games. And it just so happened that a dump truck was driving down at the same time. How could we maintain this section of the turf? Well, a guy's going to have to come around on the string trimmer. He's likely going to have to cross that barrier then, and to edge the hard line of the turf and the curb. And if a car were getting too close, he's got a fence that's prohibiting him from any kind of safety and sheltering back into the lawn. So this is a maintenance hazard. This is an area where we'll apply these turf foliar applications and try to control the turf, reduce our maintenance of that during late July, August, September months. Improving plant health, particularly with the trees. We also see an increase generally in blooming of some species like azalea, gardenia, oleander have been reported in research done by LSU and some anecdotal evidence that I've seen. And economics, maybe. Okay, Purdue did an economic assessment of this. I think it was kind of wishy-washy. It was highly variable based on species and location. I think we'd have to do a little bit better job to prove that it actually saves money. But I think all of these other benefits really give it some credence, or at least should spark the conversation on how we could best utilize these products in the landscape. So that's all I've got. Do we have any questions?
Do you have any questions from the audience? I have some questions, Paul. When would be the best time to apply some of these products?
Okay, some of the foliar products. Jeremy, you want to apply those shortly after flush. So to me, and I don't really like should I exit the screen here?
Sure.
I'm trying to do that. There we go. To me, some of the foliar products are best applied shortly after flush. I like to see that new growth, the new flush. It looks full. It doesn't look quite as manicured and tight and trimmed. To me, I like a little bit more of a natural appearance on the shrubs. And so that's when I want to stop growth and development at that stage, shortly after the flush. I don't want it to continue flushing and get a little bit out of hand. The granular products, you're going to want to apply those probably in February or March, or if you do get one pruning, or you're trying to get one pruning out of those, you're probably going to prune in June. And at that time, you would want to apply your granular products right after pruning. So you want to prune, you want all those axillary buds to start kind of flushing back out at the same time that the PGR is being taken up by the roots and translocated to those meristematic regions to kind of slow it down. So you don't want to apply it too early and then prune, and then it just looks like sticks and prune foliage for 3, 4, 5, 6 months.
That makes sense. We had a question in the chat box from DC. If you suspect you overdose, is there a specific formulation you lean on to help recover? Wouldn't that be some of the GA products? Does that help overcome?
Yeah. Interesting. I've seen overdose before, DC. It usually has some twisting, kind of mouse earring of the new growth. I don't know exactly. I think, Jeremy, that's a great point. What products might you could apply to remedy that? So I wouldn't want to list some specifically, but Jeremy, that makes sense if you do over apply the gibberellic synthesis inhibitor, which a lot of these products are. So they reduce stem elongation or cell elongation, that perhaps countering that with some gibberellic acid would counter that.
I think my notes here from something else, Floor Gib and Pro Gib TO, maybe might check the label on that, but I think I know in the floriculture, they've been used for something like that to overcome that.
Cool.
That was a good question.
Yeah. Yeah, I've only seen the symptoms of overdose. I haven't really thought about.
Well, that kind of brings up another question I had is, some of the greenhouse growers use these, and sometimes they hit them a little heavy. And so I guess that might be a concern if you were using it on a color bed and you don't want to, double dose it. If they've already put some on, you might really slow it down, I guess. If you bought a product that had already been treated, huh?
I have bought products that have been treated, and you can really tell after a few weeks, of taking them out of that environment, and you get a flush of growth, and all of a sudden this nice little compact plant that you bought turns into this leggy monstrosity. Its applications in herbaceous material in the landscape and some of these color beds, I don't think it's as common as it is with shrubs and trees. There are a lot of products labeled bonsai, which is a very common greenhouse and nursery product, is also labeled for landscape use for that exact reason. And a lot of applications of bonsai are foliar applications. And just for ease of use, and a lot of these crops are irrigated by boom irrigation systems in the greenhouse. And so they just inject it into those booms. I think it would be pretty easy to apply those as well. The longevity of those applications, though, it's not usually too long for foliar applications. Substrate drenches, you usually get a longer control, I believe, with more variability.
So I've got one. So you'd mentioned the pine nuggets and it potentially getting bound up there. Would you suspect the same out of hardwood mulch?
No, I wouldn't. Actually, in hardwoods or in wood products, we saw an increase in efficacy. And so in the multiple products that we evaluated, bonsai in particular is paclobutrazol, wood products had an increased efficacy. So it did not bind paclobutrazol as much as peat or sand, and pine bark was by far, it was in a league of its own. We had to 10x the rate to get an equivalent control in poinsettias. So wood products, actually, you could I think you would potentially come into some trouble if you were over applying then, if you did see an increase in efficacy. If you did see an increase, yeah.
Okay, I'm just thinking about in the landscape, if you were going to apply before or after you mulched. When I was using the product years ago, I always applied before I mulched just to make sure that it got to the soil. I didn't know if it was going to get bound up or not, and I didn't want to, even if it didn't bind up, lose the time that it was going to take it to move through the mulch layer, 2 inches of hardwood, then to get down to the soil, into the soil, and up into the plant.
Yeah, and all of that's extra work. I think a lot of people would say that these products are applied best directly to the soil if you could rake off the mulch. Even some of the soil injection stuff, the reason they're trying to get it right below the basal flare is because it takes so long to get up in that tree already. They're trying to do as much as they can to apply it right at the base of the trunk and reduce that time instead of applying it out at, let's say, the drip line or something like that, which can be highly variable and you're not really sure where those roots are. So that it could be a good practice. There's no research on that, to my knowledge, on landscape applications and the effect of mulch. And so I'm just kind of using what I have learned in the greenhouse and nursery evaluations of these products, and kind of speculating why we might see some of this variability. And just talking with some of the companies, they haven't considered mulch effects. They've seen variable results and they weren't sure how to explain them. And when I bring up that point, they think that's that could be a very likely cause for some of the variability.
Hey, Russell, since you got a lot of experience back in the day using this, did you see is there, in your experience, any problems with long-term use, year after year on the same hedge or?
Not that I recall. I mean, you would get like some very, very like dwarf growth, when it would start to come back out. But like the major place that we used it, there was like a 300-foot long Eleagnus hedge that was at a warehouse facility. It was on top of a 12-foot wall. The hedge was about 10 feet high and about 10 feet wide.
Yeah.
And we had to rent a big articulating lift to even prune the thing. And so it was a whole exercise trying to go down through there. And so the growth regulators, when you talk about an economic and safety benefit, were huge. So, but it wasn't, it was a screen. It wasn't an aesthetic thing. So I'll be honest, I wasn't really paying attention to the, was there anything negative? It was like, it's not growing. It's still alive. That was kind of the main concern there.
Yeah. I was wondering about that. Also I was wondering, lower pedalums down here, we got a lot of rain, sandy soil. And by the end of the season, if you're not fertilizing, they're getting kind of, if they need fertilizer, they start getting real lanky and sparse and even some senescence. And I wonder how this would improve some of that as far as that retaining that foliage. Because I know down here, if we're not, but the other side of fertilizing is you're fertilizing late in the year and you risk that lush growth getting a freeze like we did this winter and really hurting your plants.
Yeah, one of the things that I do remember, because I was working for a large landscape company at the time, it was national, and they had a shopping mall down in Florida that had a lot of these little diamonds out in parking lots that had a tree in them with some kind of ground cover and a vine. But what they found was that in trying to keep that vine in check, it actually increased flowering on whatever it was. And so they had pictures of some that were really, leggy and unkempt and just green. And then the other ones were very tight and had flowers all over them. So again, you got this extra benefit.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point on the freeze, Jeremy, and also the flowers, Russell. We're testing out, dosing some of these different trees on campus. We are a Tree Campus USA, affiliate member, and so we are trying to do our best to maintain those. Our arborist went after some Chinese elms on campus, and he thought, if we can apply these PGRs, maybe we could reduce the number of little seed discs. Now it's an invasive species that these trees produce, and minimize its invasiveness. I was like, well, actually, some of the research has shown that we've increased the flowering because you improve the plant health and reallocation of resources. And so that's kind of funny. We'll see yet. They haven't flowered yet, but I did pull these two branches this morning from it when I walked by. And this one here was not treated, and this one was. This one was about a week late in flushing back out, the one we did treat. And you could see it's much more growth on the one we didn't treat. So, it's still to be decided, to be determined what's going on and the full effect of those treatments in terms of flushing and fruiting and the amount of seed that's produced. But we're testing it out. And we're also testing out a few new products that are not labeled for landscape yet. Because of all the interest that the landscape industry is generating in these products, you're creating market potential or incentivizing companies to label turf, greenhouse and nursery PGR. So I think we're going to get more materials, more tools in this area for our landscapers to work with because of all of this new interest that's being generated.
So any more questions out in the audience? I haven't seen anything in the chat box, but any of you that just joined, feel free to fire away. Got one other that I'll throw in for you, Paul. Discoloration on turf. So I notice where on campus they're spraying around all those posts during football season where they're not having a weed eat an edge. It does kind of yellow that turf. Is that just, it is what it is. Or is there any iron or anything you can add to it that might offset it some?
That's them spraying Roundup. They're spraying glyphosate
Putting
and
the half rate down.
yeah, they're cutting the rate, and they found that the Bermuda or Zoysia bounces right back in the spring, even though they're hitting it late in the summer. And so they're only using PGRs around some of the areas that they don't want the turf to look bad, like the President's Estate. But other areas they're spraying a herbicide. Yeah, that's why you're seeing it look terrible.
Gotcha. Well, we had talked about using the PGRs for turf long ago. My boss was Dr. Gillen's son, Jeremy, and he was like, no, they're just using that on golf course. It might yellow it up, so we're not going to use those. We had miles of edging to do on some properties, so didn't go that route. Looks like we got a question in the chat box. Have you seen increase in witch's broom when regularly using PGRs, anecdotally or otherwise?
I haven't seen any of that. You do tend to see some more lateral branching with some of these applications or some of these products. It's really common for a nursery and greenhouse operation as well. It's kind of why they're using them to improve the lateral branching. But I haven't seen any witches brooming. If you have though, DC, then send them our way.
Yeah, that's caused from a agrobacteria. So I don't know if it would maybe something with more wounds might, if the tree or had more wounds, but I don't know if that would, but it'd be interesting. Yeah. If there was something there.
Okay. We're coming up on about 40 minutes now. I'm going to be sure we're mindful of everybody's time today. Any last questions from the audience? If not, thank you, Dr. Bartley, for sharing some knowledge with us today, and Dr. Pickens for hosting us. And as soon as I get this link, I'll get it emailed out to everybody if anybody missed the first part and needs to catch up. And otherwise, we will see you guys about a month from now for our next webinar. Details to come via newsletter.
Thanks for the opportunity, Jeremy and Russell, and appreciate those that drop by.
All right. See everybody later.